Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hello and welcome to Creating a Scalable Network at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife webinar. My name is Katie Lane and I'm a Product Marketing Manager here at Meraki. And this is a really exciting webinar for us today. We have a very special guest, Erik Davis from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, here with us to show us his network, how he's implemented Meraki with some really cool implementations that he's done on their network, and so we'll be able to show you how he's using Meraki and in some interesting ways. Before we get started, though, I'm going to ask you to answer this quick one-question poll. The question is, how did you first hear about Meraki? And I'll give you a second to answer that, and then we'll jump right into the content. All right, perfect. Thanks. I see almost all of you have voted, so we can go ahead and jump right in. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to go over a brief introduction to Meraki, and then I'll go over a little bit of background of cloud networking, how Meraki works, and how Meraki hardware interacts with our data centers in the cloud. And then we're going to spend most of our time diving into the California Department of Fish and Wildlife network, tongue twister there, and actually looking at their network implementation and talking with Erik here. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end if you have questions for myself or for Erik. All right, so here also some exciting news. We're going to be giving out a free access point to the qualified IT professionals on the line. It's an 802.11n AP with a 3-year cloud management license. And all that you need to do to receive this AP is to go ahead and contact your Meraki rep and confirm your shipping address. All right, so a little bit about Cisco Meraki. So Cisco Meraki is the leader in cloud networking. We have thousands of customer networks deployed worldwide in hundreds of countries. And we actually got our start out of a research group at MIT, and our founders were working on this project called RoofNet, and it was aimed at blanketing all of Cambridge, Massachusetts with these Wi-Fi nodes in order to do research on meshing and bitrate selection, some really cool stuff. But as they were doing this research, they needed a way to manage all of these nodes that were literally on the top of rooftops of buildings. So they developed what they call this hosted platform in order to manage all of these nodes through a web-based dashboard, and that developed into what we now know as cloud networking. So about 7 years later, here we are, expanded from that initial wireless and management technology to also encompass switching, security, WAN optimization, and mobile device management products. And back at the end of 2012, Cisco acquired Meraki, and we're now forming the cloud networking group within Cisco. And our goal is really to increase that investment in R&D, and now to use Cisco's reach to bring Meraki to new products, new markets, and we're continuing to come out with new products all the time. So Meraki is trusted in hundreds of small local government sites, and especially California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who is here with us today. So lots of exciting customers here in that vertical. So taking a step back, why cloud networking? And I always like to show this slide because it kind of brings us back to the core of those benefits that cloud brings to IT. One of the main ones is manageability, and in order to manage very distributed sites from a centralized location. The cloud perfectly plays into this type of use case. Also scalability, when you need to either grow or shrink your network depending on your needs. The cloud also plays perfectly into that and allows you to grow very seamlessly as your needs change. And finally, cost savings really falls into place when you're able to increase manageability and scalability in your network infrastructure. So here's an overview of the Cisco Meraki product line. We have 4 main products here. Starting on the bottom left are wireless LAN products. We also have security appliances, and then also our Ethernet access switches. And finally, on the far right, our Cisco Meraki Systems Manager, which is our mobile device management platform. It's the only one that's actually not a piece of hardware. All of the other three are actual hardware that's going to sit on your site and communicate to our data centers based in the cloud. So we're looking at the center of the screen here, the Meraki dashboard, and that's what we use to manage all of these different devices and platforms. And this is what we're going to be using today to demo the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Network to you. So I want to take a second and talk a little bit about the cloud networking architecture, exactly what's different about this type of solution than a traditional networking solution. So from a 50,000-foot view here, as I mentioned, we're using a web-based dashboard to manage and monitor all of our networking hardware. But from a hardware perspective, we have our devices that are actually sitting on site, and they're communicating up to our cloud or to our data centers around the world. And we have multiple data centers. They're all redundant and backed up, and so that's where your actual network configuration lives, and that gets pushed out to the devices and also sits locally on those devices. But it allows administrators to manage and monitor centrally a very distributed location. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is a perfect example of this, as they are distributed across all of California, as we'll see in just a moment. So it makes it a lot easier to get a snapshot of what's happening with your network from this high-level view, and also dive into areas that might be experiencing some sort of problem. So a thing I always like to point out about this architecture is we're talking about these devices on your your site, but they're communicating up to the cloud. So I wanted to talk about what that communication is like, exactly what data is being transferred up to the cloud. So we have what we call an out-of-band cloud management control plane. And so only the management data is actually sent up to the cloud. And all of the traffic is actually going to either stay locally on your network if it's destined for some sort of file server or local resource, and any internet traffic will go directly to its internet destination. No actual traffic is going to be tunneled through the cloud. It's just that management data and information about what's happening on your network, not the traffic itself. So this type of architecture allows us a few main benefits. One, as I mentioned before, is it's extremely scalable. We don't have a bottleneck that we're trying to push all of your traffic through. So it allows us to scale, and also we have our infrastructure in the cloud already for you, so you don't have to set this up on site yourself. Also, it's extremely reliable. We have multiple data centers, and they're all completely redundant, and we have a 99.99% SLA uptime for connection to those data centers. And finally here, it's very secure. As I mentioned, there's no traffic actually passing through the cloud. So this allows us to be fully HIPAA and PCI compliant. We're PCI Level 1 certified. And we undergo daily third-party audits and security penetration tests on these data centers. So I wanted to actually take a second before we talk to Erik and actually just show you the Meraki dashboard so that you get a sense of how we manage devices with the Cisco Meraki platform. So what I'm looking at right now is a web page, and this is actually the live Meraki network. And so you can see here I'm getting a snapshot of what's happening with our network. We have several devices that are, or several networks that are red, some are green, and this is telling us the state of those networks instantly. So I can see I'm managing 46 different networks right now, all in our Cisco Meraki corporate network. So these are distributed around the world, and I can click on any one of these and have it dive into that particular network. So here, for instance, I can go get a snapshot of what's happening with the wireless network at our headquarters in San Francisco. And we see we've updated or uploaded the floor plan here, and I can see all of the wireless access points around the 4th floor of our building here. And I can see all of these access points are green, and I can also see how many clients are currently connected to these APs. So I can jump into any one of these access points and get a snapshot of what's happening with this device. And this is true of any of the Meraki devices as well. I could jump into the wireless devices, switches in my network, and also security appliances right from this window. All things that are on this particular network. And I can jump into maybe our engineering network and do the same exact thing. So here I'm getting a snapshot of what's happening with this particular access point. And all of these access points or Meraki devices have a full suite of live tools that's going to allow you to manage and troubleshoot what's happening with those devices. And one of the things that's really unique about Meraki is we're actually able to do what we call client fingerprinting and application fingerprinting. So you can see here I'm getting a list of current clients that are connected to this particular access point. So I can actually see all of the clients, all the 30 clients that are currently connected, and the access point is actually learning about each of these clients. So from here I can jump into each one of these clients and find out what the access point has actually learned just by watching the traffic that is crossing through the AP. So based on my 802.1x login information, we're able to learn the username here, Erik, again different Erik, of the computer that's connecting to this device. I can also see it's a Windows 7 Intel device and what the 802.11n capabilities are. And the AP is just learning this information by watching all the traffic that's going through, such as web browser user agents, 802.1x login information, and all sorts of traffic. So we're able to build up this profile. But beyond learning about the actual device, we can also learn about the type of traffic that this device is using. So you can see here on the right all of the applications that are being most used on this particular device. So I can see some YouTube here, some WebEx, Gmail, a lot of different types of applications. And beyond showing the types of applications that are used on a particular device, I can also do the same thing on a network-wide level. So if I go back to look at all of the clients that are connecting to this network, I get the same application pie chart over here on the right, but now it's looking at the traffic for the entire network. So I can expand this out and find out what my most used application is in my network. And here I can see that it's Meraki HTTPS, and we also have some iSCSI traffic that's putting a heavy load on our network at some point. So it's giving us some information about how our network is actually being used. And then as administrators, we can make more informed decisions about policies that we implement on our network, traffic shaping policies, firewall policies, and so forth. So with that little intro covered, I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into Erik's overview here, and we can start talking about the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Network. Erik, are you there with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Erik Davis. I'm a network projects consultant with the department. I'm here. I participate in assisting the staff in adding new technologies that the team selects, things like Meraki.
Excellent. And so throughout the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Network, you have, it's a very large network. You have 6 main staff, 23 technical staff, so a large group of you actually managing this large network.
Yeah, it's 6 staff in charge of the whole network. The 32 other technical, or the 23 other technical staff, we can't count the help desk. They're
Gotcha.
a separate group. But the 23, they're responsible for the users and the edge troubleshooting, that kind of thing.
Got it. All right. So jumping into a high-level overview of your network, kind of broken it out into these 3 main groups. You've got your core in Sacramento, you have branch offices throughout California, and also these remote locations where you have fish hatcheries and some really unique type of locations that you have to provide coverage for. Is that a pretty good snapshot?
Yeah, it's I guess a third of our users concentrated in the metro Sacramento area. The branch locations are things like regional headquarters, places where we actually have higher bandwidth circuits through the state network, and then it's only the one-off. Well, when I say one-off, 1/3 of our network is out in rural areas where getting a connection to the state network is difficult, to say the least. And so
right.
Using Meraki and the fact that it's out there on the internet to give us a management pane was a very high value add.
Great. Yeah, let's actually dive into that a little further. Some of the unique use cases that you guys have, which made the Cisco Meraki solution a good fit for you. And you just mentioned that one. It's also out, on the cloud, just like your users are out in the field. So it kind of actually gave you some supplemental resiliency to your network, right?
Yeah, yeah. When we're dealing with, if we're dealing with a statewide type outage, we still have the ability to service that third of the users that are outside the state network, and that's a huge advantage versus if we had an internal tool that did it. The minute there's a problem on the state network, we're blind to everything going on a third of our network.
Absolutely. So that's definitely a key for your specific type of deployment, which is pretty unique. Also, getting this instant visibility into what's happening, as you do have very distributed sites. How many sites do you think you have total?
Total, including all three types of locations, I think there's 117 properties we have something going on.
Yeah, okay.
For Meraki, I think we're doing about 88 or so in some form or another, including some telework sites we're testing out.
Okay.
There's about 76 physical buildings, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a large deployment there. So you're able to use Meraki to flexibly manage and bring up new sites from anywhere, and I guess your 6 networking staff are able to manage those remotely most of the time, hopefully. Hopefully they're not going around to all of those.
Yeah, well, and that the ability to just hand a Meraki box to one of those other 23 staff that might be going somewhere, or mailing it out to them and having them plug it into their ISP, and thanks to the inventory section, being able to just create a network, load up the devices we shipped, and configure them so the minute they phone home, they download everything we want, is a great time saver.
Great. Yeah, that fits really well for how you are using the equipment, for sure. So let's talk about the how your users are actually using the network. I know you're a Microsoft shop for the most part, right?
Yes. Yeah. We're doing a full AD implementation.
Okay.
And we're even on our 802.1x for our corporate network. We're leveraging the Microsoft NAP-NAC implementation to be able to do our authentication directly to the domain.
Great. And those users in the field are connecting to centralized domain controllers at the core. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, they use the auto VPN feature to be able to phone home to the domain no matter where they are. And we actually are authenticating the machines, not the people. So that way, the minute they plug in and they go get their morning coffee, by the time they get back, hopefully we've updated and inventoried their system. So it works out really well.
That's very cool. And then you also have guest users that are using the network as well, or maybe not as much as your regular corporate users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a few in and out partners that we work with some other state and federal agencies that they'll tend to spend 30 days or so in our office. So.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about how you're actually using the Meraki devices. You just mentioned how you're using the remote or auto VPN functionality at all of your remote sites. That's connecting to your core, and you have the MX400 at your core, and that's serving kind of as a concentrator for the most part for these other VPN connections. Yeah, and then also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say we use the MX60s and 60Ws depending on whether we have wireless at an office as well, or whether it's so small the wireless on board the 60W meets our needs. So
and
that's a big value add too.
Great. And you actually had a really unique deployment. Do you have an MX60 on a spill response vehicle or something?
Well, we're working. We've got an MX80, one of the 24-port switches, and a couple of, well, actually right now one AP that are packaged with a server we deploy when we go out to spills, so that way when they're in the office, they can work on their server, and when they have to just pack up, they just put the lid on the case, roll out the door, connect it into whatever internet they can find, and it phones home, and they're just like they're in the office.
That's pretty great.
So they're enjoying the experience. Right now it's offline, ironically, but otherwise I'd show you it online.
All right. And then you have mostly, from a VPN topology point of view, mostly hub and spoke. Everyone's connecting centrally to your core, but also you have some mesh VPN, right, where sites are connecting directly to each other VPN?
Yeah, for the most part, to cut down on the number of conversations, because there are so many MXs out there, rather than having them all mesh to each other, we did limited meshing, where if there's, say, 2 or 3 little offices in the same town or in the same neighborhood that have their own DSLs, and they maybe share files through a local NAS, or they have one big plotter or one big printer, rather than making all that VPN traffic go all the way back to our core and hub back, we let those auto mesh so that they can work together and get a little quicker response on their local work.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So I figured, since we're talking about our MXs here, I'd go ahead and show everyone your network deployment here, so we can see kind of the snapshot, just like we were looking at the Meraki network. This is the California Department of Fish and Wildlife network across the whole state of California. So we have 91 networks right now that you're managing. And you're based in Sacramento, right?
Yep.
Great. So then here you can really easily expand and search for a particular network you're talking about. Should we go and show one of the networks that has the VPN up and running, and we can show how the auto VPN is connected to your core? Or
sure, we could go to, if you want to see one where everything's combined.
Sure.
Only part of it's online right now because we're moving it around, but if you do a search for lab,
okay,
and you go to CDFW lab there, kind of shows the objects kind of all over the place, but we got the combined security appliance, switch, and wireless here.
Oh, gotcha.
If you go to that one and go site-to-site VPN.
Okay, site-to-site VPN. Great. So here,
you got it. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to give an overview of what we're looking at. So this is connected in full tunnel mode. You could do full tunnel or split tunnel. So split tunnel would send only the site that's destined for the core over the VPN and everything else to the internet. But you're using full tunnel because you have centralized content filtering and all sorts of stuff too, right?
Yes. Yeah. We already had the WebSense product, so we're leveraging that since it was an in-place product, rather than using the Meraki web filtering options.
Gotcha. Cool. And then you can see here the full tunnel concentrator you've selected. So you could select from any of the other MX devices, but here obviously you'll select your, this is probably your MX400, right?
Yes. Yeah, we can look at that one later if you want to, too, with our total traffic.
Cool. That would definitely be good. So then here...
And now this one right now is connected to all VPN peers.
Okay.
You can switch that over to directly, and then it'll ask you which one.
Gotcha. Okay, so this one is in mesh mode.
Yep.
Great.
But you can switch it right now, because that's why I took you to the lab.
Oh, I don't want to change your network.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I have the privileges to anyway. But let's see. Here we can also get a snapshot of everything that this is connected to. So all of your remote VPN participants. So here one of the great things about the Auto VPN is you simply select which subnets you want to advertise across the VPN. So here you selected the CDFW subnet, and so you're not passing any guest traffic to the VPN or to your core, which makes sense. And then here you can see the overview of all of the remote VPN participants. So wow, this one is in mesh mode, so it is really connected to everything you've got here, or a lot of these.
And if you want to switch up to the monitor VPN,
okay.
if you switch to that one, it'll show you how which ones it's connected and not connected to, and the kind of latency we're experiencing.
Gotcha.
It takes a second for it to go through and pull up all the statistics, but it should bring a status to all of those. There we go.
Great. Perfect. All right, yeah, so here we can see the ones that are connected, you're right, and when the last heartbeat was as well.
And all those ones you see disconnected, because even though this MX is set to mesh mode, all those offices that say disconnected, they're specifically set to hub and spoke. So they're refusing to talk to him. So even though he's in mesh mode, he's not forced to connect to all 92 of his neighbors.
Great. That probably makes it a lot easier to deploy, since you don't have to go set each one individually, each remote one, firewall rules or something like that. Very cool. So let's jump to your core as well and show the overview of that site-to-site VPN as well. I guess it'll look pretty similar, but these are probably all connected.
So you should have a couple of devices offline, and that should be about it.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so all green. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Accidents happen.
You're looking good
But
today.
a really interesting thing you can see here is the latency on the round trip. Where you can, if you scroll down, you'll see some of ours that are working on the VPN, even though they've got 1,934 milliseconds.
Yeah.
We've got some ISDN, some satellite links, some pretty interesting little corners.
Wow.
There are a couple of sites that are kind of measured in seconds more than anything.
Definitely. Here's another one. 2,000 milliseconds.
Yeah, but
Very
thanks
neat.
to Meraki's VPN, it's survivable even in those situations.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes it pretty easy because it allows that cloud to help broker some of that initial, especially for public IP addresses that might be changing, especially when you have people that are moving around and connecting in random places to the internet. You can still establish that VPN connection. Great. So let's go ahead and jump back into the slides here and talk a little bit about your wireless deployment. We talked a lot about MXs, but you also have Meraki Wireless deployed throughout a lot of your network as well, right?
I think we've got right now about 172 APs deployed at this time. We're in the process of rolling over from a HP Colubrus solution to Meraki.
Okay, great. And that's a mix of indoor and then some outdoor as well at some of these fish hatcheries and what have you.
We have some campuses that are between 3 and 10 buildings, and they don't necessarily have cabling between them. So the Meraki Auto Mesh feature and the MR66 we're testing those out as a kind of a campus bridging solution to get from building to building.
Oh,
and
great.
it looks like it's going to work pretty good.
That's great. That's really cool. So you're using the outside outdoor APs, the MR66s, between those buildings. I guess they're pretty close to each other or nearby.
It kind of, I think you'll see a picture of one in one of the slides, where they kind of almost look like a little neighborhood of houses. At one time, that's pretty much what they were.
Great.
We've got all sorts of claimed buildings from property that people have left behind.
So let's actually just go and jump into that in your network here. Let's see. Do you have that wireless network you'd like to show off? Is it the CDFW wireless?
Yeah, we've got two main wireless networks. CDFW is kind of all around the state, and then
Okay.
CDFW Cap Man Wireless is the one that's specific to Sacramento.
Okay.
Because even though we didn't implement the MXs in Sacramento, we did implement the wireless.
Gotcha.
And we implemented it citywide due to the proximity of all the offices and the way guest networks work. If you switch that back to map. But the way guest networks work, so rather than having to know which building they're asking for guest access, we do one giant network for the city of Sacramento. So we can authorize somebody no matter which building they're in.
Great. And you actually have some other pretty interesting use cases of how you're able to create SSIDs on the fly and apply them to specific access points.
Yeah, we do a lot of, we got our mobile website and our web developers work in one building, but I guess you'd say the approving authorities and the really the interested parties don't work in our building. So a lot of times our developers are looking at having to build up solutions for doing a website or a mobile app or a tablet kind of app. And as they develop it, they need to work in our location, and they need to work with devices that aren't necessarily department standard devices.
Right.
So we leverage a more secure SSID to allow those devices to specifically work with the development environment. And then when they go to talk to their approving authorities and talk to their customers, now that we've pushed this wireless network across the city, we've done tag-based activation on all our SSIDs. So all we have to do is go to the office, find the access point near the conference room that they're going to be using, type in the tag dev, and their development network pops up in that conference room.
That's very cool. I like that.
30 seconds of administration.
Anything that can make your life a little easier. So actually, let's go look at that. If we go to the access points here. So here we can see a listing. Oh, go ahead.
On each one of our access points, you see a series of tags that they not only show which SSIDs are active on that radio. For example, the one you have highlighted has our 802.1x network, CDFW, activated. Our legacy, because we used to be called the Department of Fish and Game, we've got a legacy network that's still on as we migrate people to Windows 7. And then our guest network, and then our mobile device network, so that way our iPhones and stuff are on their own authenticated SSID for tracking. And then this last one we have on the list is actually it's a location identifier, because the MRs are not only capable of controlling what SSIDs appear on an AP through tags, but you can also control which VLAN each one of those SSIDs gets dropped onto. For example, by doing the RB one, that's one of our headquarter buildings, so we know that if an access point's in that building, it needs to be dropping users to a specific VLAN, phones to a specific VLAN, things like that. And by just putting that tag, it handles all that VLAN tagging for us.
Very cool. You have this very nicely organized. Makes it nice to look at. Let's actually look at some of your SSID configuration, since we were just talking about that. So here we can get a snapshot of all the SSIDs you have configured, probably a lot of test ones as well, but then those other ones you were talking about already, CDFW, Department of Fish and Game. So this is an overview of all the SSIDs, but then if you want to actually dive into that configuration, you go to Access Control here, and then you can select the SSID that you want to look at here. So Eric, do you want to walk us through how you have, this is probably your main network that
Yeah,
everyone connects to?
this is my my 802.1x network, where we chose, rather than using Meraki's authentication, we're actually handing off to our own Radius server. And
Great.
because we're authenticating with 802.1x, we don't need a splash page or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you scroll down, you can see that we configured our Radius, both the server and the accounting server, to do our logging. And
Great.
if you keep going down, because we have a specific network for mobile devices, we've actually blocked by device type, saying that even if somebody figures out how to trick the network into maybe letting a device try and connect to it with 802.1x, we're going to block these brands, so that way we make sure they're not jumping on this network they're not supposed to be on. So
I like that.
we bridge all the traffic onto the local VLAN, as you see as you continue to scroll down, and then you see we use tagging, and based on putting a location tag determines what VLAN everything falls on.
Great.
So as you can
That's
see,
really great.
we do a few different ones.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, this is really great. So these are based on the location tags of the
Mm-hmm.
APs?
Yeah, there's on the where we saw
Tag.
on the APs not only the SSID tags, but these location-based tags to determine VLAN.
Great. It's a really, really neat implementation. All right, and then you have dual band with band steering as well.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to push people up to that 5 gigahertz.
Yeah, well, especially all the newer laptops, they should definitely be running at that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, and then your other networks were probably a little bit different if you have this guest network, for instance.
Well, this is one we're testing with Facebook Wi-Fi,
Oh,
where
cool.
you actually, when you connect to this, it's an open network, and it immediately presents you with a greeting page of our Facebook fan page for the department, so you can kind of check things out, maybe learn a little bit about us.
Yeah.
We were kind of exploring that because we have a lot of buildings that have our department name on them,
Mm-hmm.
and people show up assuming that they can buy a fishing license or a hunting license. And unfortunately, all I can do is make them connect to the internet.
Right.
So by enabling this, it kind of gives us the ability to steer them a little bit when they start looking around.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then you're using here for your guests the NAP modes. This is actually handing out a DHCP address from the access point instead of giving. Yep.
It's really interesting to do NAP mode with the Meraki DHCP because it's a little bit more obfuscation, because every client gets a specific NATed IP pair with the AP.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have like 4 or 5 guests and they all connect to your guest network, each one of them could have a 10net address, one of them could have a 192 address, and the rest of them could have 172 addresses, because it randomly uses all the private subnets. So even if somebody's connecting, they're not really learning about your actual infrastructure other than that you're using Meraki.
That's very cool. So let's actually jump into your firewall and traffic shaping, because I know you have some traffic shaping rules and firewall rules on your guest network.
Yeah. Well, when it's an open network like that, you got to take the fun out of it.
Uh-huh. Definitely.
So because it is so accessible with the Facebook logon,
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to make sure there was no ability to do peer-to-peer, to do any sort of gaming or streaming or playing with online backup, stuff like that. It was intended entirely to let people connect to the department, learn a little bit more, maybe get that lifeline of, oh, I need to check an email, something like that.
Absolutely. Great. And then let's see. Let's look at the firewall and traffic shaping rules for your regular.
I mean, those are all trusted devices, so we don't want to put any regulation on them because
Absolutely.
they're part of the team.
Free reign here. Great. And we just got a question for you, Eric, about how many users are in your network generally. Actually, we could look at that here.
I think over the past, let's see here, for this, as far as it's been pushed out so far, we're pushing like 1,400 on this implementation right now.
Great.
Like right now on this on the Sacramento wireless network, you've got 222 clients on this specific, and that's let's see here. That one has Capman has how many APs? It's got 73 APs, so 222 people on 73 APs.
Gotcha. And these are pretty big buildings. A lot of space to cover.
A lot of the problems are some older buildings. The walls really knock down Wi-Fi, and so we're having to do a little bit higher density, just entirely to deal with the legacy construction habits of where our headquarters is the first high-rise ever built in the city. So.
Oh yeah.
That gives you an idea.
It's interesting, yeah, architecture to deal with there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. So let's see. Let's actually jump back into. I think unless someone has any questions on wireless, let us know in the Q&A, and then we'll talk a little bit about how they're using Cisco Meraki Systems Manager for some mobile device management as well. So you guys have a lot of technicians, as you mentioned, 23 that are managing the end user devices.
There's 23 out running around the state, triaging both in building and at home offices, and I mean, we have biologists that are at universities. We have scientists that are out in a river counting fish. So we have a group of people that has to go top to bottom, edge to edge, all over the state. We're even responsible for 3 miles. 3 miles out in the water? Yeah, 3 miles.
Oh, wow.
But because of all that, we've now reached out with the Meraki bubble and connected us a little bit more with that edge, but still, even beyond that, there's a farther edge of wherever they happen to have a problem. We've got a group of people that has to go find them and help them.
Definitely.
And when you're on our internal network, we've got the full deployment of SCCM and Microsoft's tools to be able to manage the machines. But the farther away you get and the more obscure your internet connection gets, the harder it is for SCCM to really grab you and help you. And so we've begun the process of testing and working out the Meraki PC device management, because the mobile device manager not only applies to things like phones, it applies to laptops, workstations, whatever you need it to apply to, both Windows and Mac. And so that's really something that's going to give us that backup in case SCCM has a problem. And it also gives you a really easy, quick glance when somebody doesn't really know where they are.
Right. Or if you need to track down a device
as
well. So I know you're just starting to roll this out, but let's take a look at your systems manager network as well.
If you go up to, it's up, CDFW user.
Ah, there we go.
You'll see we got 7 total machines we've put it on so far as we've been testing. You flip over to the client view.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And you can see I'm running out of hard drive space.
You're right. Yeah, this HP computer needs some help here.
Yeah.
All right. Great. So yeah, this gives a snapshot of what's happening with these Windows devices. And as Eric mentioned, it can be used on Macs and also iPhones and Android devices as well. So wherever these devices are, even if they're not actually on the Wi-Fi network, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Wi-Fi network, anytime they're actually connecting to the internet, we can actually see what's happening with these devices. They're checking in with Systems Manager to give Erik's team the ability to get a snapshot of what's going on and troubleshoot any problems they might be having. So as you guys grow, you can use this search tool to really easily track down which devices you're looking for.
And an even stronger feature is even before you get here, just by being in the Meraki dashboard, if you go up to the main dashboard search up there in the top right, no matter which page you're on, if say I called in and I was having problems somewhere out in the field, if you type in the name Davis,
right,
because and it says search for all Davis and search clients matching Davis. I was going to look around and just say, do I have one? And boom, it's found me.
There it is. Great. You're right.
And it uses your IP address and everything to try and figure out where you are. It tells you current status, and you see things like, wow, your hard drive's kind of full. But really, I think one of the big things is if you click that fetch process list, somebody says, hey, things are acting a little weird, a little slow, you can click on that, and you can see all my processes like Task Manager without even having to go to my PC.
Gotcha. Do you want me to click it?
Go ahead.
I don't know if it'll let me fetch.
It should.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And if there's a runaway process taking a whole bunch of memory, click kill, and there you've solved my problem without even having a remote desktop.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And then you also have the remote desktop to fall back on as well. If you do have.
Yep.
That's neat.
And the classic NetSend pop-up windows, you can send a message to a user if you see a problem or you're looking to contact them.
Yeah. Here we could send you a notification.
And if you scroll down a little farther, you can see where I've been and what I've been doing. So if, say, someone's moving from an internal network to an external network, or they're like at the edge of a building and they're hopping between somebody's guest network and our private network because they've clicked on things and made a mistake, you'd be able to see all that activity here, and help you kind of troubleshoot the situation at hand.
Definitely. That's really great. And then snapshot here of your client performance, what's happening right now, bandwidth, memory usage. That's great. Thanks so much, Erik. I think, let's see if we have anything else to cover here. What's next for you guys? I know you're still deploying maybe switches in the future and continuing to roll out Systems Manager.
We've got a handful of the 24-port switches, which work really well for our larger, very remote places that don't have very good internet connectivity. But a lot of these little locations, we found that the 4 ports you get on an MX are almost enough, but not quite. Maybe there's a network printer. Maybe we want to deploy a couple more APs, things like that. And so you can either choose to buy a little unmanaged switch, or Meraki just came out with the 8-port, and we're testing our first one right now of the 8-port switches. It's in our lab.
Great.
Testing it because it's 8 copper ports and then 2 SFPs. So you can do a fiber connection if you got a little implementation somewhere where you've got a Meraki gateway and maybe a couple of buildings with some fiber. You can do some interesting things, and you can combine both those switches and your security device all in one network view, so you get a nice consolidated experience.
Awesome. Erik, that's a great summary. Thanks so much for taking the time and sharing how you've implemented Meraki. I'm going to wrap up here with an overview of the products we've talked about. If anyone has any questions for Erik or myself, definitely ask them while I'm kind of wrapping up here, and we'll see if we have time at the end for any other questions. So Cisco Meraki offers free trials. So all the products we've talked about today, we do free shipping both ways, no risk at all to try any of these. So when you're calling to get that free access point for the webinar today, go ahead and ask about any of these products. that you think might be a fit, and I'll be happy to set up a free trial for you. And here is an overview of those products, starting with the wireless access points. It says 5 different models, but we actually just announced our latest 802.11 AC access point as well, so that brings it up to 6 here. So we have indoor and outdoor models, both of which Erik's able to utilize in different scenarios, and we've talked about some of the features today, but really didn't even get to touch on a lot of the deep features we can implement here, things like traffic shaping, and Erik mentioned a little bit of mesh that they're using maybe between different buildings. We talked a little bit about the network access control. We can actually limit by device type which types of devices are logging on to different wireless networks. So some really deep features here available with the Meraki wireless access point product line. Here's an overview of the security appliances we talked about today. So these are the MX devices. We have all different models, basically dependent on how much throughput you're requiring. So Erik had the MX400 at his core, aggregating all of these other MX connections around different sites throughout the state of California, and using the site-to-site VPN to allow those users at all the different branch offices and remote sites to be able to experience the network like they were sitting in their offices in Sacramento. And also cloud-managed switches that we just talked about. These have the same cloud visibility and layer 7 application visibility that we saw with our access points, but on a switch level, and they're managed through the cloud. So some really cool features with our switches that we didn't get time to talk about today, but some really great features here. We also have PoE and PoE Plus or non-PoE options switches for powering those access points as well. All right, and so wrapping up here, let me check with Jackie if there are any other questions. All right, this is a question that we kind of went over but didn't fully cover for Erik. One of the questions was, what type of devices do the teleworkers have?
We've been testing out, we tried out using some of the APs, but they're a little pricey for a telework experience. The Z1, which is a sub $200 device that's about the size of any of those little Apple gateways, or about half the size of your usual Linksys switch.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those. As a matter of fact, if you switch over to, on the network, go to telework and scroll down to,
oh, here we go.
Yeah, go to the network one.
Oh, there, I see.
Because that's my house. That's the one I'm testing out.
Gotcha.
And you can see my TV pulls most of the data.
Mm-hmm. Xfinity here. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
it's not as robust as the rest of the MX series, but for basic wireless and the fact that you can split it between a premise like personal network and the work network and kind of isolate the two, you can create a very usable telework experience. We have 300 and some home offices that the department is supplying internet to, because there is no facility for the staff to travel to within a reasonable amount of time. And so we're looking at these to provide us that visibility. So since we're responsible for their internet, being able to see their internet and help them when it goes down, rather than somebody call and say, you know, it doesn't work and Comcast won't help.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. All right, great. Some other questions we're getting, Erik, and maybe you can answer this one. How do you find the integration with other vendors' products? I mean, we do integrate with third-party products, but we don't integrate with other wireless controllers, for instance. I mean, you need to manage wireless access points through the Meraki dashboard. But as far as integrating with other switches or other vendors' products, you have a pretty diverse implementation here. What has your experience been?
We're doing some of the syslog dumping to our internal syslog servers, and that's working out really well. As far as direct integration, it's a little. We pull some SNMP data internally. We use SolarWinds for the rest of our network. We do some Cisco, some HP kind of multi-vendor experience inside. So we have a neutral party for our network management, and the Meraki dashboard has an interesting SNMP connection, and I think the guys at SolarWinds are working on making it more interesting. But you can actually enable SNMP on all the APs, and you can collect the data if you've got an open wireless network management system, like the wireless management in SolarWinds can collect in parallel to the Meraki dashboard.
Right. Okay. Great. And then, let's see, a question that came in for me is 11AC available yet? The question, or the answer is, it will be available probably at the end of the summer, early to fall. We've just announced the access point, so it should be orderable very, very soon, so keep an eye out if that's something you're looking for. Another question is, are all APs plug and play? And Eric, you could probably answer this one.
When you get an AP out of the box, if you haven't done anything to it and you plug it into the wall, it phones home to Meraki, checks in, and because when you purchase it, there's a purchase order associated. It checks in with the company, says, hey, this is my serial number. The dashboard checks to see if that purchase order has been registered with any networks. And if it hasn't, it sits and all you see is a SSID that says Meraki setup, and it just kind of sits around and hangs out and waits. And then when you go into the dashboard and you add in your details, the minute that serial number is connected to some configuration you've made, it starts downloading and going.
Excellent. That was a great summary.
Yeah, it's about 4 reboots between it downloading your config, downloading firmware updates based on your preferences, things like that.
Great. Eric, I think that about wraps us up for time here. I think we've tried to answer almost all the questions that are coming in. I know Jackie's been typing way over here, answering the ones coming in online as well. Thanks so much for showing us your network and all of your use cases here. It's been really great, and appreciate all of the extra color commentary you've added for us. So thank you so much for joining.
Not a problem.
Not
a problem at all.
Excellent. And I think that wraps it up. Thanks, everyone on the line, for joining. Definitely give us your feedback so we can make these webinars better in the future. Thanks so much.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.